Okay, so I'll be presenting on confrontation. So the basic of confrontation is the helper wants to point out discrepancies and inconsistencies that in what the client is saying or the client's beliefs, behaviors, and it can also be in the nonverbal. So for example, you can have, for example, a client that comes in and talks about how she's struggling with money. She has no money, she's very stressed out, and then later on in the conversation expresses that she really hates working. In that scenario, you can see a discrepancy where on one hand, she's struggling with money and wants more money, but on the other hand, she's disclosing that she hates to work. So the purpose would be to bring that to her awareness so that with the helper, she can work towards finding resolutions to those discrepancies. So early on in counseling, confrontation was done by personal attacks and abusive confrontation. So people were using very abusive approaches to confrontation and even using swearing words and things like that to get a rise out of the client. And the purpose of that was to create change. However, that wasn't very practical, and they since then have found a better way of demonstrating or of applying confrontation, which is more of a moderate confrontation, and it's more of a gentle push towards being aware of those discrepancies and those inconsistencies. And so the purpose is to create a mild tension during the conversation, and what happens is the client wants to get rid of that tension. So to do that, they move towards changing beliefs, behaviors, words, and attitudes. Now if we look at an example of a nonverbal, you have a client coming in and they're sitting in a chair, arms crossed, kind of slouched over, frowning, and you can ask them the question, how are you doing today? And if the client says, oh, I'm doing great, their nonverbal is telling you something else. So that can be another example of inconsistency. And you could also use I statements. So for example, taking that same scenario, you can say something like, you say that you're doing great, but on the other hand, I've noticed that you're slouching, your arms are crossed, and such. So to demonstrate how to do confrontation, I'm going to ask my volunteer, Charles, who's going to be my client, and we're going to do a bit of a role play. Pull up a chair, Charles. So how are you doing today?
Not too bad.
Good. So are you looking forward to the Christmas holidays coming by quickly?
Yeah, I'm really excited. Holiday season's a little bit tough because financially right now I'm sort of unstable. Mm-hmm. But I'm really excited to give my 3 sons their new iPads for Christmas.
Really?
Yeah.
So on one hand you're saying you're struggling with money, right? It's causing you stress. Yes. And it's definitely, I can understand that. But then you just said you're getting your boys iPads?
Yes.
Which are pretty expensive, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of something missing there, right? So if you're struggling with money, but then you're buying expensive gifts, so what do you think that you can do to kind of...
Well, they did say they were looking forward to getting a new hats from their favorite baseball team for Christmas as well. I guess I could go with the alternative.
So maybe look at less expensive gifts would be a better idea in this case?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. So in this conversation, I pointed out that Charles was saying that you can go have a seat in here. But Charles is saying that he was feeling stressed over the holidays because of money situation, and he was struggling with that, and then he said he was going to buy an iPad for 3 of his sons. So you can see the discrepancy with what he's disclosing about not having enough money, but then going to spend a lot of money on Christmas gifts. So that would be an example of how you can use confrontation. It doesn't have to be anything that's done negatively. It could be done in a very supportive way. Thank you.
Hi, so today I'll be discussing feedback and how to properly give feedback as a helper. So what is feedback? Well, feedback is the process of us as helpers providing our clients with information about how we perceive them and their actions. So why do we do feedback? Well, feedback is very important to help our clients grow and develop as a whole, and to help them achieve greater self-awareness and personal growth. And what's involved? Well, it involves us telling our clients what it is that we see, we feel, and we suspect about their behavior and their actions, and just things that they do that we observe. There's 2 types of feedbacks that can be given. I like to clarify, as professionals, we give professional feedback, which is very different from personal feedback. To elaborate on this, as professionals, we are here for the client's benefit. We give feedback according to how it would benefit the client, rather than worrying about how our feedback will affect our relationship. That is something that's left for personal feedback. So for example, when you're with family, sometimes you don't want to tell them certain things because you're afraid it might hurt their feelings. This is not necessarily true for a helper. Not all feedback is taken positively by the client, but sometimes they need to hear regardless. The only thing we can do to help facilitate this is to tell them feedback in a positive and supporting way without being judgmental. So what are the 3 main purposes of giving feedback? The first purpose is to indicate how this behavior affects us, the helper, in our relation with them. So for example, we can tell our client that their behavior is something that's getting in the way of us helping them try to get better. The next purpose is to evaluate their progress towards achieving their goal. So this is when we give them feedback to tell them how they're doing and how we believe they could do better, and how it is that what are the things that are holding them back. The last main purpose is to provide information based on our observations. So basically, this part facilitates the other 2 parts. This is when we give them information to let them know that they might be on the right track. However, and then this is where we fill in what we see. There are 7 really important tips to giving feedback. The first one is to not give feedback on their personal traits. So if you notice the client is very tardy, you don't go and say you're a very tardy person. You would be like, I've noticed that certain habits of yours seem to affect you in this situation. So this would be an indirect feedback on what it is on that personal trait that you're trying to describe. The next one is be specific, concrete, and non-judgmental when you're giving feedback. So you want to say what it is that you're trying to get across. So you would want to tell the client directly that that one behavior is affecting the other one. Next one is, before ever giving feedback, ask for permission. Number 4 is to offer feedback tentatively. Number 5, don't overwhelm them with too much feedback at one time. So try and keep it to 1 or 2. And the next one is to always give positive feedback along with negative feedback. as well as the last one is to ask their feelings regarding how it is they feel about hearing that feedback. Now I'd like to do a quick role play with my classmate Jassy to demonstrate how feedback is done. So this would be me as a helper and him as a client. Okay. Hi, how are you doing today?
Good.
So how have you and your boss been doing?
You know what? My boss is always criticizing me for coming late in meetings.
Okay, so I've also noticed that when we do our sessions, you always come a few minutes before, after when we're supposed to start. Maybe this might be a trend. And that is an example of feedback. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, this was our presentation. Hopefully you found it helpful and it will help you in your future endeavors.
And that, my friends, is
the art of helping.
All right, guys.